I would like to hand over to the next speaker. Alice, may I invite you to the stage? Alice is the one who is changing street by street, city by city, UK. How she's done it. Bottom up. That's the presentation that is to come now. Any sense I'm getting tired, so I apologize, but now is yours. I'll give you another mic. The stage is yours, Alice.
Thank you very much. So Simon was nervous about following Jeanette. I've got to follow Simon and Jeanette and all the other amazing speakers from yesterday. It's going to be difficult to say anything brand new because they've said a lot of, you know, just the overall truths about streets and children that I want to also talk about. But I'll try and find one or two new things to say. So I just want to start with, actually I'm going to come off that slide. Just want to start with a bit of audience participation, just to warm you up a bit before lunch, because everyone's probably flagging. So can you just put up your hand if you played when you were a child? And just think about your best memory of playing as a child for a few seconds. And I'm going to ask you to stand up if that memory was outdoors. Ooh, good, it worked. And can you stay standing up if your memory doesn't involve adults? Yay, it worked. I was a bit nervous. Okay, you can all sit down and you can all share your best memories over lunch. So I also have a lot of good childhood memories of playing outside. I was very lucky. I grew up in the city in Bristol, but I lived on a no-through road. So we played out in the street a lot. And there was a big tree at the end of my street. So one of my best memories was climbing this tree with the next door neighbor, the boy that lived next door. And we would sometimes like throw little seeds down onto the cars that were coming into the street very slowly. So my anti-car activism started young. And I just remember the feeling of freedom, excitement, being a little bit naughty, and just being unsupervised by adults, being out of the sight of adults as a very special feeling and a special part of my childhood. So sadly, the tree is no longer there, but the memory is still very strong. Then as I grew older, about 8, 9 years old, we could wander further. We could go further from home. And we would find places to go that were generally not the formal playgrounds where we were supposed to go, but other places close to home where we could feel like this was our space. We could have a sense of ownership over this space. And this really beautiful space in the slide is one of the places that we used to go, not on the road, because that's like a 6-lane road, but underneath was actually a perfect space for roller skating and all kinds of games. We would play with a big skipping rope. Lots of children, all different ages, all different backgrounds would come and meet in this space because it was easy to get to, it was close to where we lived, it was a bit out of sight of adults, but it still felt safe. So those spaces are very important to children. And we would also play this. Does this exist here? We called it French skipping. So we used to play these games for hours and hours and hours, all day. And any of us who grew up with this experience of playing outside on the street and a little bit of freedom, we know how much it gave us. It provided a huge amount of benefit. It gave us physical activity, so nobody was thinking about this. People weren't sending their children out going, go and get some exercise. It was just, it comes naturally when children have space and freedom and time. they play, and through play, they are naturally physically active. So we were getting all this benefit without it being planned. We were learning skills like cycling, skateboarding. These things are now, in official public health terms, this is called physical literacy. So it's children basically learning how to use their bodies, but it was something that we just had very naturally through playing outside. We also had a really strong sense of community, knowing where we lived, knowing the physical environment that we lived in and the people who lived around us. That sense of belonging where you live was very, very strong. And we got to make friends outside of school. We weren't limited to just those people in our class. I had friends of all different ages, all backgrounds, different schools, just from this experience of playing outside on my street and near home. And also it was fun. I think it's really important when we talk about children playing and playing outside, that it doesn't just become about the functional benefits, that it's good for their health, it's good for community. It's also just what children want to do because it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's exciting. But even then, so I'm talking about the 70s when I grew up, even then, one or two people, Jane Jacobs in New York and Colin Ward in the UK, were starting to raise the alarm. They were starting to notice that things were already changing for children. Children were starting to be pushed out of the space that traditionally belonged to them, the street. So this quote from Colin Ward is from his book, The Child in the City. I would strongly recommend everyone to read it because even though it was written in the 70s, it's still incredibly relevant, like depressingly relevant. Now, nobody listened to him. Nobody listened to Jane Jacobs, really. Progress continued and children's needs were trampled over and forgotten. And where this was heading is where we've ended up now. Children's freedom has shrunk, their, what we call their roaming range, so how far they can travel independently from home, that has shrunk. And this map is from a study done in the UK, and it happens to be the city of Sheffield, city in the north of England, but it could be any city. And it's showing how over 4 generations of one family, the child's freedom, the roaming range has just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. So the biggest blob, this is the range that the great-grandfather had when he was 8 years old in 1919. So he, aged 8, he could walk 6 miles to go fishing. And then the smaller blob is his son, and then the smaller still blob is his daughter, and then the tiny dot on the far top right is the son who's 8 now and can only go to the end of his street and back. And that's even more than a lot of 8-year-olds are allowed now in the UK. So, and alongside that sort of wider freedom to roam, children's just time spent outside has also massively reduced. So this is one study, but there have been quite regular, frequent studies looking at how much children play outside and how it's changed over the generations. And this graph you probably can't quite see, but it's showing that adults in their 50s, over 80% of us played out as children, whereas children now, about 27%, it says, regularly play outside on their street. And this is quite a shocking statistic that came from a survey actually sponsored by Persil, because they like children to play outside because they get dirty and then they have to wash their clothes. But yeah, this is quite a shocking statistic, and I don't know how that translates to other countries, but things are pretty bad for children in the UK. And of course, like one of the impacts of this reduction in freedom, reduction in time outside and playing outside, is children's physical activity levels are really quite shockingly bad. I think it is, I did check, and it's better in the Czech Republic than in the UK. So well done, whatever's happening here, but it's still not great. It's still, I think, only about 50% of children get the 1 hour a day of physical activity that they're meant to have as a minimum to be fit and healthy. So it's not brilliant. And then, of course, the less children are physically active, the more they are unhealthy. Obesity is a huge and growing problem in the UK. So now 1 in 3 children leaves primary school physically overweight or obese. So 1 in 3, it's quite shameful that a developed country has this statistic. And you probably all know children in England are famous for being unhappy as well. We always score very low on these well-being scales. So there's a lot of problems that children are facing now, and I think even in the best countries, things are not great for children in the modern world. So one aspect of all this is obviously children's loss of freedom to play outside their time. It's not the only cause, other things have changed, but I think we can say with certainty that it's a significant part of the picture and something that needs to change. So why are children not outside is the next question. What's changed? So is it, as the newspapers like to say, is it that modern children aren't interested in playing outside? They just don't want to. They'd rather, according to this headline, they would rather do their homework than play outside. They're lazy, basically. They just don't want to play outside. Or is it, maybe it's parents who are to blame, modern parents? So I don't know if you have this saying here, but cotton wool parenting, keeping children very protected. This is a common accusation thrown at parents, that you're overprotective, you're paranoid, you don't let your children play out because you're just so fearful, irrationally fearful. So is it these things? Well, it may be partly, and it may be partly screens and technology is an attraction to children to play inside. But I think we've also got to look at the outside environment. What have we done there? And what part is that playing in the whole story of children? So I think we can safely say that in most countries, as we've seen through all the presentations, it's the same story. The space that was where children played, the space on their doorstep, the space that was an extension of their home has been lost to them. And we've given it over to cars. And it wasn't necessarily planned. Nobody intentionally set out to make children prisoners in their own home, but it is the effect of basically not thinking about children's needs and putting other needs above children's needs. And at the same time as taking away the space that children did traditionally play in, the space near home, we've kind of created these cages where we expect children to go and play instead, which are not particularly attractive quite often and quite boring places to play. And also, children can't often get to them anyway because of the traffic. So we've sort of sent children to play over there, but children can't get over there. So it's not a great situation. And in terms of parental fear, studies have actually shown that the main fear that parents have and the main thing that's stopping them from letting their children have more freedom is traffic danger, which is a real danger. It's not imagined. Children are killed by cars every day. And one of the studies that we did with British Cycling found that the vast majority of parents said they would teach their children to cycle, they would be happy for them to cycle on the roads if the streets were safer. And it's the main thing that's stopping them. So it's not paranoia, it's very rational fear that parents have. So I'm just going to show this very, very short film, just to show that also a lot of children are aware, conscious about the impact that cars are having on their lives and their freedom. And this girl, Maddie, she goes to a school in Bristol in one of the most disadvantaged areas in the whole country, actually, on the outskirts of Bristol, and she lives in a block of flats. But I'll let her talk about what's stopping her from playing outside. Can we play this? There's no sound. Sorry. I'll just tell you what she said. Basically, she's just saying in her block of flats, she can't play on there's a small bit of green space because there's always adults there smoking and there's dogs, and she can't play on the street because of the cars and the traffic. And if she wants to play with her sister, she has to play inside. So that's the gist of what she's saying. And we did a whole project with her school where that was the general message from children, was that they couldn't play outside because of cars and traffic. So the UK government loves to claim that our streets are one of the safest in the world, and that traffic danger has, become a very small problem because the number of people being killed on the streets has reduced, and the number of children being killed on the streets has gone down from the very, very high numbers in the 1980s. But we need to look at the whole picture of that and why those statistics, why children are not being killed as much. Is it because the roads are safer? Is it because people are driving more carefully and the streets are better designed? Or is it because we've strongly given children the message that they need to be careful on the streets, they need to take responsibility for their own safety, or just stay away from the streets altogether? So these are just a few road safety campaigns from the UK from the 1970s through to now, and it's just the same message being driven home to children. You need to be bright, be seen, make yourself safe, and none of these messages are really going to drivers about, you need to drive more carefully, you're the one that's causing the danger. And the fact is, children are still being killed on roads in the UK. So these are just the numbers of children as pedestrians and cyclists that are killed or seriously injured. So 30 children killed or seriously injured by cars every week in the UK. And these are real children, individual children. I mean, I wish we still had the children here so we could see some real children, because they're not just numbers. Each one of these children, it's a life, and it's a life that's been lost unnecessarily to cars. So we need to talk about it. We need to take it seriously. And actually, again, the impact of this is worse for children from poorer areas, where they're usually out and about a bit more, maybe less likely that their parents own a car. And this is quite a shocking statistic as well, that children from the poorest areas are 6 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured than those from the more affluent areas. So all of the impact of this, just to say, the impact of the loss of freedom and outdoor play as a normal part of life has been worse for children from lower income households, because they are less likely to be compensated by being taken to paid-for activities or being driven to a park a couple of miles away. That access to safe space on your doorstep it's a matter of equality. It's a matter of democracy, actually. It's making sure that all children from all backgrounds, no matter what their family circumstances, have that access to outdoor space, to play, to physical activity, to social connection. So it's extra important from a social equality point of view. I'm just showing this slide to give a shout out to somebody that has become a really strong campaigner for this stuff, Tom Flood. So follow him on Twitter, or I think he's actually just come off Twitter, but follow him somewhere. So he actually comes from a background in car advertising. So he's got amazing skills of selling things, but what he's decided to sell now is the idea that streets need to be better and safer for children. And he uses really strong images like this to make a very strong point about the inequality between cars and children. And then this is another one of his slides. So what have drivers sacrificed for children, and what have children sacrificed for drivers? And I'll let that speak for itself. You can see the inequality there. So it's quite a strong image. So after all the doom and gloom and misery, I'm going to move on to the positive side of the story. So that was really setting the scene of where my organisation and my work came from. So we started this as parents. So 15 years ago, my kids were small, and this is my street. And myself and other parents started talking about all of this, how things had changed since our own childhood. We couldn't just let our children play out on the street anymore like we used to. We had to organise things for them and take them places. And we didn't really want to be doing that. And also, we just felt they were missing something incredibly important, incredibly valuable, that experience of playing with other children on their own street, being part of their community, having that everyday access to play. So we, particularly my neighbour Amy, who's an artist, and myself, we started thinking, what can we do about this? We're not happy to just accept it. You know, there must be a way to change things. We don't want this status quo. We want to change the world. And maybe we could just start very small with our own street. So we had already had a couple of street parties. So this is quite a strong tradition in the UK, that you can close your street for a day, maybe once a year, up to once a year. Usually it's to do with like a royal event, a royal wedding or a coronation, or, you know, those kind of things. So it's not a frequent event, but it's something people like to do and get dressed up and be a bit silly. But it's quite a big thing to organise. There's food, music, usually other things, organised entertainment, that kind of thing, and lots of bunting, we call this, like these flags. So Amy and I started thinking, well, if we can apply for permission to close the road to the local authority, but maybe we could use that to do something much, much simpler, which basically just creates a safe space for children. And let's just see what happens if we do that, and we don't organise anything else, we just make the space safe. So we did this one day after school. It was actually International Children's Day, 2009, which we thought was symbolic. And we decided to do it in the after-school period, like 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., because we wanted to make a point that that was the time that children needed to be able to kind of come home, drop their school bag, get a snack, and then just go out and play. That was our memory of playing out as children. So we did it at that sort of time. We We did it very much with the support of our neighbours. So we consulted everybody on the street. We asked everybody to be involved, to raise any concerns they had so we could discuss it. And then when we had enough support, we felt, you know, we could apply to the council to close the road for this 3 hours after school. And we also got people to volunteer to wear high vis and to stand at each end of the street. We decided to let cars stay on the street because parking is, like, as we know, it was an incredibly contentious issue. There is no space, really. There are way too many cars for the amount of space. So it would have been impractical to ask everybody to move their cars because there was nowhere for them to go. But also, we wanted to demonstrate that it was possible. Well, we didn't know this at the time, but we were hoping it was possible to combine children and cars. And we felt that the main problem, the main issue was just the speed of cars coming down the street, the speed and the frequency. So we decided that if we could just stop through traffic coming down the street, it was okay to let people leave their parked cars on the street. And then if anyone wanted to move their car during the play street, somebody would walk in front to make sure that there were no children in the way and that it was safe. So that was the model. And the effect was magic, basically. So we were really worried beforehand. We were thinking, is anyone going to come out? Will children know what to do? Will they think it's really boring because there's no organised activities? But we didn't need to worry, of course. Children came out of nowhere. Like, about 80 children came out that first day, and we were like, where have they come from? And they had all come from the street. They weren't, we didn't advertise it more widely. But normally we just didn't see them. They were stuck inside. And what was amazing, actually, was quite often the children hadn't met each other on the street either. So we had children saying, oh, you're in my class at school, but they didn't even realize that they lived across the road from each other. So that was amazing and very reassuring to see that children haven't forgotten how to play. They haven't forgotten how to play on the street. It's something that just comes very naturally to them, and they didn't need to be instructed or organised. They just got on with it. And they played so actively as well. That was the other observation. It was like they just don't stop moving when they've got that opportunity. And we actually had a friend who worked in public health in Bristol University who came to that session, and she was like, oh my God, this is, you know, really significant what we're seeing here. This is like a light bulb moment for public health. So after that first session, we started getting interest from other parents around. They heard about it, or they'd maybe walked past, and they asked, like, if they could do it on their street. So we just started giving a little bit of advice and support to some other streets around, and the idea started spreading in Bristol. And then we saw the same thing on every street, basically. Children came out, they were really happy. Parents came out, they were really happy. Other neighbours, older neighbours also came out, and everyone met each other, and everybody liked it. And then the council also came along to some sessions, some people from the local council, and they saw that actually this was a way of bringing communities together, which was a big challenge for them, and making children more physically active. So this is actually a really exciting piece of paperwork. It might look boring, but for us this was like very radical, because I don't know if it's the same here or most countries, but local authorities are not known for risk-taking. They're not known for supporting people to do what they want to do. being responsive and just allowing people to get on with things. But this is exactly what this bit of paper, this policy did. It allowed any street community to fill in a form and apply for a whole year's worth of regular closures for play, up to once a week. So it's amazing. I mean, there's a much longer story of like how we managed to get this to happen, and we didn't give up at the first no, as Stefano said. We did have a few no's at the beginning, but we kept going and persisting, and eventually we got this in place. And then as a result of that, the national media started getting interested. So we got some really good media coverage about the idea. And from that, we found that actually a lot of parents felt the same all over the country. We weren't alone. And in a way, that was the start of growing a movement. And we had a lot of people contacting us and saying, we want this to happen in our city, in our local authority. How do we make this happen? So we decided to set up Playing Out as an organisation at that point in order to support the model and grow the movement, but also with a much wider, a longer term aim of restoring children's freedom to play out as a normal part of life. We didn't see play streets as the end goal. We saw it as a catalyst for change and a platform to start speaking out about what children needed longer term. So we set up a website, very simple website, and we just put all of our learning, all of our resources out there so anyone could follow the model and get on with it. And 12 years later, these are the numbers that we see. So we've got over 1,500 streets across the UK have played out now, 275 in Bristol. And LA's on here as local authorities, so over 90 other councils have copied Bristol's play street policy and made it possible for people to do this locally. And we found there's a bit of a like a snowball effect with councils, so the more that do it, the more the other ones feel like reassured that they're not doing something crazy and very risky. They're seeing it working, and so it just makes it easier and easier. And we also managed to even get the national government to put out some guidance to councils to say, this is a good thing to do and it's legal, so get on with it, which was very, very useful. So just to say about the numbers, so one play street might not sound like very much. 1,500 play streets might not sound like very much, but it's important to remember that each one of these streets is a whole community, is lots of children, lots of adults, all getting benefit from it. So we've calculated, we've got a page on our website if you want to look, but we've calculated that those 1,500 streets regularly playing out, maybe over 2 years on average, that equates to 1 million extra hours of children playing, which is pretty cool. So we've also got data for people who like data, showing the impact of play streets for children and for communities. So one of the obvious impacts is children are more active at play streets than they would be otherwise. Bristol University did a study where they attached accelerometers to children to see how much they moved about, and it was up to 5 times, they were up to 5 times more active than on an average day after school. So that was good. And then we've also got a lot of research about the impact for communities, how it brings people together. And this is partly because the process of organising a play street is done by residents, it's done by people themselves on their own streets. So through the process, they are having to get to know their neighbours, talk to each other, negotiate, and build those connections. And then, of course, the actual play street itself is a space where people can come together, and people of all ages do come out. It's not just parents and children, and they meet each other. And people have talked about it helping to break down barriers between different groups, different ethnic groups even, and it's a chance for people to all come together in that space. And another important benefit for us, area of impact, is around active travel. So there's a formal term for walking and cycling is active travel. And we've shown that not only do children learn to ride a bike on a play street, but it really helps to change people's mindset about streets because they're experiencing a street without car dominance. And it's really helping to just shift people's thinking towards actually realising that streets are quite nice without cars coming down all the time, and that there are other possibilities for those spaces. And in some instances, it's led on to communities asking for more permanent changes. So all of these areas of impact, obviously policymakers like this, but they also like the fact that it's a very simple model. It's very low cost. It costs them almost nothing because all they have to do really is give permission, and then the residents do all the work themselves. And it's very immediate and impactful. It doesn't take long for it to happen. So I'm just showing this complicated diagram to just show the sort of ecosystem that's in place to make play streets successful in an area. So Playing Out, my organisation, is part of it in terms of just providing the general information and resources and a bit of support to residents and to local councils, but also all the rest of it that happens at the local level is really important. And it's all these different actors working together, the residents, the local council, some groups on the ground who can give a bit of direct support to communities that need it. This is a really important point. So although one of the real values of play streets is that residents are doing it for themselves and all of the active citizenship that comes from that, it's really important to be aware that not everybody can easily do these things. Some people have more time, more confidence. It's just easier for some communities to do it than others. So we've done quite a lot of work to find out what people need in terms of support in certain places. And we've also worked with communities in different kinds of settings, not just streets, but in, you can't really see here, but this is like a tower block, like a 20-story tower block. So there is space outside the tower block, which is normally out of bounds, used by cars, that these residents have just reclaimed for a few hours for play. And we've put a lot of learning about this kind of direct support for communities into a toolkit, which is also available on our website. So the other thing to remember or to be aware of if you're trying to do anything like this is not everybody likes it. Not everybody wants change. Some people love the status quo. So we've had a lot of this stuff since the very, very beginning, since the first play street. And it tends to be the same questions, the same arguments that come up again and again and again. So we've got very good at responding to them. And one of the ways that we respond is to say that actually the street, a child's own street, is a very special place for children. It's not the same as playing in the park, or if you're lucky enough to have a garden, playing in your own back garden, because the street is it's where community happens, it's where life happens, real life, not playground life, which is a bit specific. It's very near home, so it's a space that, as a child, as long as it's safe to be there, you can be coming and going freely, you can be there every day. You would be using that space a lot more than a playground that's a mile away. And there are other children there, there's community. Nobody wants to play by themselves in their back garden. It's much more fun to be out where other children are. And the other point about playing out on your streets and play streets is that it's not just for the children, it's for the whole community. The children and the play kind of give people a good reason to be there, like an excuse to be there. But it's good for everybody on the street. So I could go into all of this a lot more, but you can also look on our website for more detail in these 10 good reasons. So I just want to kind of finish by saying, like I said, we don't see play streets as the long-term answer. We do think they're great. Like they've got a lot of benefit, and there's a lot of life in the play street model to go, because we've got quite a long way to go until our streets are safe and car-free everywhere and children can just play out everywhere. So in the interim, these kind of things are very valuable and very important. And they're also part of changing the culture. So as well as getting people to think differently about the space and about children, play streets actually build the conditions that make it easier for children to play out. So we've seen on some streets, especially where maybe it's a no-through road and they're a bit physically safer, that through doing a regular play street, there's been a culture has built up where it's become normal and acceptable for children to play out, and neighbours know each other, so there's more sense of trust, and drivers coming into the street are more aware that children might be there. So it's become okay for children to just play out there every day. So that's been amazing. But as well as the benefits of play streets, they also kind of demonstrate some important things that we can learn from in terms of what needs to change, bigger picture, on a policy level. So one important thing is that they show that children want to play out. Where they've got that opportunity, they're choosing to do that. They're not staying inside on their phone or watching TV. They are coming out into the street. Nobody's making them do that. They want to be there because it's more fun to be in real life with other children. And also parents want this for their children. So again, it's sort of busting the myth that parents just want to keep their children safe inside. They don't. They want their children to have that experience of playing outside with other children. They just need it to feel safe to do that. So the main factor in enabling children to play out is safe space on their doorstep and permission to use it. It's really simple, and we just need to look at how we make that more possible. And the other thing they show is streets are not just for cars. They can be ideal play spaces as long as they're safe and free from traffic danger. And as Simon said, one beautiful thing about streets is that they are a blank canvas. They're not telling children what to do or how to play. They're not restricting the way that children play, and children respond to that really, really beautifully and very creatively. And you just have to see children playing in that space to kind of know what I mean. But it's amazing to see. And also, play streets show the benefits of playing out near home. If they get that amount of physical activity just from doing this one day a week or one day a month, imagine if they had that experience every day. It would solve a lot of problems. So we really want policymakers to take this on now, take on this challenge. So one of these images is the policy that we would like our government to adopt. The other one is the policy that our government has just announced. I'll leave you to work out which one's which. But we've got quite a long way to go at the moment with, well, I don't think anything's going to happen with our current government, but we're thinking further ahead. And our aim would be that a future government would adopt a child-centred policy to just reconsider the way that we use streets and the way that we get around. And all other policies to do with public space, actually, would be great to put children at the centre. So play streets have spread internationally now. This is a project in Australia. They're aiming to get 1,000 play streets across Australia. And I've just come from Berlin, where they are now up to 100 play streets. And again, like, the model has adapted to fit different national circumstances and laws, but the main things are that we've really tried to sort of emphasize where we've worked with other countries are try to keep it resident-led, try to keep it at least partially owned by the people that live on that street, and try to keep it free play. Like, don't go in and try and organize children, because they need this freedom to do what they want to do. So, and then I'm just showing this because this was a play street in Berlin, which has now become a permanent play street. It's completely closed to cars, so it can happen that one thing leads to another. So I was very excited to see that. Long term, we just want streets where children can be out and about without fear of being run over, where they can just live their lives. And this image is from COVID, like during the pandemic. We saw that it is possible. So we just need to work out a way to make that permanent, because who doesn't want streets like this? It's good for everybody, not just children. So thank you very much.